Just wondering if there's anybody here that's new to BIM4Housing. Maybe is anybody here that is new that's not been to any of our meetings before? Put your hand up if there are. Doesn't look as though there is. So you all know what we're about by the look of it.
Well, George Malcolm's put his hand up.
Hello, Malcolm. So where are you from, Malcolm?
Hi, George. Hi, I'm from South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. So South Yorkshire, Tom, that's are they that's an almost neighbour of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We like South Yorkshire. They're great. It's got Sheffield in. Sheffield's brilliant.
So I think what we'll do, Malcolm, is what would be useful probably is for you and I to have a 15-minute one-to-one after this, not necessarily straight after it, but I can then bring you up to speed with what we're doing generally, so that I'm not boring everybody else with that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So let me open up by just explaining what we're doing today. So I just need to. So we've had a very busy week, which I'll bring you up to speed with in a moment. But we've had 4 workshops, BIM4Housing workshops already this week, where we've been working on safety critical assets, which I'll explain in a moment. But this is the agenda that David put together. Not everything that we're doing in BIM4Housing is around fire safety at all. So it may appear that that's what we're doing, but what we're trying to do is look at information management from a particular purpose and a context. And fire safety is obviously and building safety is obviously a critical part of that. So that's one of the reasons we've concentrated on it. And what we're now trying to do is look at how we can have a range of different software applications that are being verified against what we're trying to get out of them. And a relatively new one that we're working with is a company called OneTrace. But there's lots of different really good survey applications that what we want to do is then understand how they're being used and make sure that there's consistency in terms of how inspections and things are being done. Also, we've been exploring how we can get the fire services to or give the fire services better information. And from what we understand, one of the challenges that the fire services have got is the locations of hydrants, and also the locations where they can bring the appliances into. There's something, as I understand, that some people are doing now over and above the secure information boxes. They're developing emergency response plans, and I've got an example of that I can show if anybody's interested. And then a thing that we've discussed at the last meeting was coming up with a standardized way of describing what information is required to satisfy Regulation 38. So supply chains aren't being pulled all over the place, being asked for different things by different people. So one of the challenges with that is that people have got different consultants who are often providing advice to them, and they're doing a great job, don't get me wrong. But if they're asking for information to be provided or structured in different ways, then it makes it very difficult for the supply chain to be able to manage that. So one of the things that we want to try and do is provide more standardization of information, and also make sure that everything is then coordinated to avoid rework and misinterpretation. So I'm going to stop there for a minute and just throw it open to the group. So to have a discussion just around those two things. Can I ask for some volunteers to tell us what they think? Otherwise, I'm going to pick on people. Anybody? Vic, could you come? I mean, you've been speaking to the fire authorities, haven't you? You know that monthly meeting?
Yeah.
I've tried to join it a couple of times and it's not happened. Or
You're still not getting on it. I've been on it since, so it seems to be still happening. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Would you like me to contact them and ask them to send you the invite?
yes, please. That would be very helpful. And
Yeah.
so were you on it? I think there was one this week or last week, wasn't there?
Yeah, I didn't do that one. I was away, but I did the one before.
Okay.
So yeah.
So
Still going
what
on.
sort of thing? What sort of thing were they contributing?
Well, it's not. So basically, it's a drop-in for people to ask questions. So you can just drop in and find out what people are asking, or if you've got something yourself, you can ask the questions. And generally, when I've been on it, people are tending to ask to clarify the PIBS information, for instance, because it seems like different officers are probably asking for different things. I've had an officer come and have a look at some of our blocks, and she wanted the plans laminated so that they don't get messy, or in a fire situation they don't get messy or wet or whatever. And others have actually said, well, actually it's easier if they're not, because you can't fold them up and put them in your pocket and go off to a floor and have a look or whatever, because they're laminated, they're stiff. So there's seems to be different approaches. So that seems to be some of what's coming out in some of the meetings. So clarification on that. How I think the amount of information that are on plans is something that keeps coming out, because people are trying to put too much on one plan now. So you're talking about the cut-off points for your electric, your gas cut-off points, the water. They're trying to put that on the fire service plans, with all the key information, and it's just a bit too much, I think. So we're separating plans out. It seems more people are having separate plans for, where the cut-off points are, as to where the all the services are, to where your different plans for your sprinklers and for your alarms. So I think that's been a lot of the conversation. But also it's been about call outs. So there's been a lot of, call outs where there've been like toast going on fire or whatever. And the fact is the RPs or the registered providers or the PAPs are not knowing that this is going on, because people are calling them themselves. Fire service expect you to know when somebody's called out to a HRB, and why. But often it goes under the radar, direct to them, and they don't know. These are the things that's been coming out in those conversations.
Brilliant. Okay. So can anybody else speak to that at all? How are you finding things with the information in your secure information boxes? We've got a few landlords on here, I think.
I'm going to come in from a consultant's perspective here, because obviously I see a lot of different buildings from a lot of different housing providers, etc. And actually, we're finding from our perspective going in that actually the SIB contents is not where it should be. It's not to the NFCC guidance, and there's a lot of information lacking in there. And I don't really understand why, because to be perfect, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not on the other side of the coin. I'm not an RP or a PAP or anything like that. But ultimately, the guidance is really clear in my mind as to what needs to be included and what should be in there. There's even a kind of a Templar example at the bottom of the guidance that kind of says, this is what, and it's really easy to build. I've kind of built a document, for us to be able to give clients and what have you when we are instructed, to say, this is it in a nutshell. I can build your plans, I can build your building, that's not a problem. But I don't understand why there seems to be a lot of lacking information as far as the SIBs are concerned.
Yeah, there seems to be confusing information about the 2 folders as well. So having the lobby folder and not we've got 2 folders in ours. And again, that was quite prescriptive, I thought, from the regulator's point of view. But it seems that very rarely do people have a lobby folder from when I spoke to others. And when the fire service have come and inspected ours before we put the lobby folders in, there was nobody even questioned the fact that they weren't in there. We put them in since, but there's been no mention when they've seen them since that they're in there. So I don't know if people are using lobby folders or not.
For anybody that isn't aware, I think this is what you're referring to. I don't know whether there's an updated version of this. This is National Fire Chiefs Council for...
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, it's 4 years old, but I think it's pretty good. I'll just go down to the things that... There's the emergency response pack, which I'll show you an example of one of those that's been recently given to me. And also the content of the box. So you should have a plan like that lets them know where they can park.
That gives hydrant information as well, George. So there should be symbols on there for hydrants in that plan as well.
Absolutely. But what I've been talking with one of the fire services, and there is a plan of where all the fire hydrants are, because that fire hydrant may not be available or may be already being used. So they want to know where all the fire hydrants are. And it may be that in a busy area, there's ones that's the impression I get anyway, Nikki.
Well, some of them are privately owned as well. And again, a lot of people don't understand that actually, if you've got a privately owned hydrant, you're actually responsible for the maintenance of that and to obviously get competent person out and to maintain that on an annual basis as well. And again, that kind of falls by the wayside, because I think a lot of people just assume that all hydrants are publicly owned, and that's where the fire service go out and maintain those. And they do those with the publicly owned ones, but they won't do it with the privately owned ones.
That's a really good point. Thank you for that. We'll pick that up. So what this is doing here, this is giving you an elevational view. But these are the things that, you're supposed to indicate on the floor plan. So you need a floor plan, which is amazing that we're still having to say that. And then these are the main things that need to be indicated on it. So what we're doing at the moment, trying to tie this back into Regulation 38, so that we've got that as a comprehensive thing. I'll just show you. This is one that Hyde are using, and there's a couple of different companies that so this is an emergency response plan. Now, I'm not clear as to whether this replaces what's in the SIB or whether this is in addition to it, because it's holding very similar information. I think that's quite clean. So that's, Nikki, would you say that's got to, oh, sorry, it's Vic that was talking about the too much information. What do you think of that?
No, that looks quite clean to me. I think it's the strategy plans that the fire service want, and they've actually, you know, prescribed what they want on there, what they want to see on there with regards to the key, and that will also have AOVs on it and etc. And but it doesn't have some of the information this has got on. So if you try to combine the two, I think it would be too much. So what I'd say is the one the fire service wants with their key on, and then the extra information to that should be on this one. There is a little bit of a crossover though with the look of it.
Okay, well, that's fine. In fact, that actually can be done by having different views of the same information as well. So, Vic, have you got something there that you could share with us? Not now, but have you got an example that you could share with us and we can distribute?
Yeah, I'll send something over.
Good. Okay. Who else is a landlord that might be able to contribute to this? Come on, the idea that it's a working group, this is, you're supposed to be working. Hello, Simon.
All right, George.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I do know Light for Life. I know Andy quite well. And to be quite honest, his plans are probably better than quite a few others that I've actually employed to do similar PIB drawings, SIB drawings. They are quite detailed, but he will do anything to your requirements. But these are probably one of the best. Now, I've used Multivista and Girder, and they're not quite as good as these, to be quite honest. And he seems to be fairly competitive. Also, like you say, with the overview plans, you can mark it up as best as possible with all the fire hydrants in the locations and everything else.
Yeah, so what we're basically promoting is that there should be, this should just be a view of the master asset information model. So the drawing is a view. Therefore, if people then, you know, for example, are carrying out any work on some of these areas, anything that they update can then be viewed in whatever that tool is.
That's it. And also you should make it available to the LFB on their online HRB portals if it is a HRB.
Excellent. Okay, so that's good. I mean, the other thing that we're doing at the moment with that most of the people probably on this call have seen, but we're also capturing 360 photos.
Yeah.
And the 360 photos then enable you to then verify the information that's in the SIB. So I can, you know, if that's appropriate, we can share those. But so is there anything else that anybody's interested on or that? Sure, or shall I go on to the next one? If you're interested in being part of that discussion about standardized asset data or standardized requirements for supply chains, if you just put in the chat standardization, we'll invite you to the workshops that we're doing, and you can then contribute to that. So if you just put standardization into that, we'll let you know. I'd also like to know if you're using, we obviously want as many of the different software vendors as possible to be compatible with what we're doing. And one of the, I think, big challenges is that the applications like Risk-Base and Plan Radar and OneTrace and Bolster and things like that, they're very good systems, but the challenge is that if everybody sets up the inspection requirements differently, then we end up with inconsistent information. So a part of what we're trying to do is standardize the way fire door inspections are done, ventilation inspections are done, and things like that, so that we've got a degree of consistency, so that there's then a check, rather than that can also go out to procurement people as well, so that when they're procuring inspections and surveys, it doesn't drop to the lowest common denominator. So if you are using any applications that there's new ones I've noticed all the time. That OneTrace one is one that I've not come across until about 4 or 5 months ago. So if you are using any of those sorts of applications, would you mind putting just in the chat that is what applications you're using, or what applications the people that you're employing are using? That's probably a better way of saying it. Okay. We've got a company called Mortar that we're working with now. They've come into the group. They provide an alternative to spreadsheets, so that it's a database driven thing. And what we're trying to do is use that as part of the change management process. So I can, that's something that we can show you some examples of probably in the next meeting. We've got some things going through there. Another thing that we've been promoting is the use of data engineering and AI to be able to take information and then bring it into something that is a bit simpler to understand than the guide. So the safety critical asset information that we were working on the last couple of days, typically for each of the asset types, we're looking at maybe 20 pages of detailed information, which I can show you an example in a moment. But what we need to do is make that more consumable. So we're going to be using AI over the next month to simplify those things, but without losing the detail, which is quite a challenge. And we're asking if people are interested in participating in that, to be able to help shape what questions are being asked about smoke dampers, for example. Why do you need to know that information? And do you need to know not just about the smoke damper, but the wall it's going into? And there's a range of different ways in which experts in the community are already using AI to create agents and tools to do things. So we want to try and create the environment for that to be communicated. So if you're interested in either looking at data engineering or AI, then if you put AI in the chat, we'll invite you to the next workshop. And then the safety critical assets. Has anybody got any observations on that before I move on to that? I'm going to stop for a minute, because otherwise this is just me talking. David Pope's much better at this than me. Steve Coppin, do you have anything to contribute on that at all? The joining together of things? Maybe that's not the best topic to bring you in on.
No, it isn't, because I'm involved with the design specifications, and basically I'm not close enough with using the way clients are not procuring the supply chain. They're all relying on the principal contractor, which is wrong, to do all the necessary rather than dictate what they're going to get. And this is part of the problem down the line. And I'm talking major contractors without giving games away. I mean, talking the top 5 contractors in UK. they tend to keep it all under their umbrella, what they're doing. And this is part of the challenge, is having somebody to actually ascertain what they're changing on the design, let alone are they doing what they should be doing as such,
Absolutely.
conforming to. Because the problem, as you know, there's no liability on the building control approver legally. Yeah, they can sign off all these buildings, well, left, right, and centre, but the evidence needs to be there by the duty holders.
Absolutely. Denson, what do you do? I recognise your name. You've been on quite a few of the workshops.
I work for a subcontractor, Alimat.
Ah, okay. Subcontractor doing what type of work?
We do rain screen, doors and windows in kitchen woolen.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So do you have any thoughts on, are you in the IT side of things? I think I'm
No,
going to
I'm
move
not.
on, actually.
I'm actually not. I'm actually wanting to find a bit more how we can actually better our IT system with the way things are moving and so much workload. So IT, no. So I'm in terms of IT, I am just digesting and learning from you guys.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to move off that now. So what we've been doing this agenda was put together in August for this meeting to give you a report back. But the BIM4Housing guidance on safety critical assets, which I don't know if you know where that is on the BIM4Housing website, but I can show you that. We've been doing a lot of work in that area over the last 4 years, actually, and we've got detailed information on the safety critical assets. So, in fact, let me just show you an example of that. Where we started with this, and all of this is available off the BIM4Housing website. When we started, one of the challenges was actually learning what information people need about the individual safety critical assets. So when we're asking people, what information do you need to know about a dry riser or a sprinkler system, it was actually quite difficult for people to answer that question. So not because they didn't know, it was difficult to actually articulate it because they said it depends. They needed to know the context. So what we did, we had a working group, a series of working groups on both in person and also virtual. And we actually went through all of those people. Oh, sorry, I've just realized I'm not sharing. Apologies. Schoolboy error. Yeah, so we had these workshops and all those people there are developers around the table there, or they're part of the development community. These are all manufacturers. So all people that are sitting around the table sharing their knowledge. These are all designers, and then people over in the background, they're operations people. And what we did, we brought them together to look at the various different assets, and we asked a common set of questions. What risk does an asset mitigate, a particular asset? And what do people do to assets to stop them from working? What information do we need about them to ensure it performs? What competence is needed? Oh, sorry, what tasks and methods and procedures are needed so that we can make sure that things are done properly? The levels of competence that's needed, and also how do you track change? And we did that for 12 main safety critical assets, AOVs, fire alarms, etc. And the level of detail's quite significant. And then we also went through on some of them, and we produced standardized fire door inspections or inspection guides, which are quite high quality, which this is all available on the BIM4Housing website. And we've recently done the same for fire dampers, fire stopping, and things like that as well. So all of that's available if you'd like to see it. And then this last week, we've actually gone through for each of those different asset types. We've then grouped them by sort of function. So smoke control, for example, compartmentation, and we've run workshops this last 2 days. So that we'll be producing the outputs from that. They're all recorded. We've updated the guidance documentation, and that's what I was saying earlier, that we're then taking that and we're going to turn it into something that can be applied using large language models. So if you're somebody that's interested in understanding how you can have information glued together to be able to audit compartmentation, for example, then if you put your name in the chat, we'll invite you to the next workshop. Do you think, so I'm now going to just open it out to the group, is that something you think that what we're doing is worthwhile there? Eddie, would you like to say something on that, Eddie?
I was just going to say, yes, definitely it's worthwhile. Yeah, it's good. It's very I was going to put a thumbs up, but that's fine. Yeah. Great.
The challenge is that nobody knows everything.
No.
And even if you go along to an expert, what we found is that they will interpret things differently according to their experience, which is obviously the right thing to do. But when you can bring them together with other people that are also experts, we actually flush out quite a lot of things that are inconsistencies. So the one that we held on Wednesday morning, on Wednesday morning for fire doors, in itself was brilliant from that perspective, because we got some very experienced people on there. They didn't necessarily agree, but they ended up agreeing. So a lot of that was a real good way of capturing knowledge. Similarly, yesterday we had somebody on who we were doing sprinklers, and we had a guy that has spent the last sort of 10 years doing sprinkler systems and things like that. So his was a really interesting perspective, because he was questioning and challenging some of the things that, or updating. I mean, he said that the guidance that we produced 2 years ago he said it was excellent, but he was able to go through and just update it with things that could be enhanced, as it were. So all of those are being updated. Sprinkler systems, all the ventilation stuff. So that's where we're going with that. So the other aspect that we've not done yet is lifts. So we've got a group about to start. We've got a new recruit who's a lift expert, and he's going to be pulling together people that are interested in that. So if you're interested in getting involved in the lift side of things, if you put lift in the chat, we can recruit you for that as well. Okay. I'm going to pause there for a minute. And has anybody else got any questions to ask or raise? What would you like from the other members of the group? Have you got any topics that you feel we ought to be covering?
I think for me, George, but I don't know if it's going to be good for this group because of some, the majority of the people that are in it. But for me, there's the confusion around category A and B works for high-rise blocks with regards to the building regulations and what's included and what's not in there. So it tends to be causing quite a bit of confusion, especially with RPs. So, but I don't know if anybody's got any further information they can add for that.
I think that's a really good question. Does anybody have an answer to? Do you want to just explain what category A and category B is? Vic?
So category A works would mainly be sort of structural works or anything that's going to affect the compartmentation of the buildings. Making new flats, making the height, making it higher, the building, etc. Category B works generally falls into what doesn't come into category A, unless it's exempt, and anything that's exempt would be covered under probably a scheme, which would be applying for building regulations anyway, or like accredited contractors who are doing the works, say for glazing or doors or what have you. But there's quite a bit of confusion about what other works are in category B that we might need to be aware of and probably don't really realise.
I've got something to contribute on that, but I don't want to cut across what other people are saying as well. So has anybody got an answer to what Vic was just raising there, rather than a new topic?
I think, to be perfectly honest with you, George, what's important is that the building safety regulator needs to be a little bit more specific about what they're categorising as category A and category B, especially when it comes to HRBs, because the long and the short of it is that determination of the word significant. Significant works. Well, what's significant to one person isn't significant to another, and vice versa. So ultimately, that it's about them getting their ducks in a row and being more specific in their language as to what they want categorized in that A and B categories, because otherwise there is going to be this ambiguity in the industry with regards to what is in each of those categories. So I don't think you're going to necessarily get a definitive answer unless we get a little bit more specific information from the regulator with reference to actually what they want included in each of those categories, rather than just saying, oh, well, if it's significant works, it should be category A. And if it's not significant works, well, that leaves us with, determining, basically making our own determination of what's significant and what's not.
Okay, so this is really interesting, Nikki, because I think it's pretty widely understood that the regulator isn't going to be much more specific and explicit than they are, because they don't want to take on that responsibility. It's similar with building control. They don't want to take on that responsibility. So what we've got is a vacuum, right? Now, what do we do about that? We can bounce around complaining about it, or alternatively, if we've got an expert group like this, for example, and the other people that we've got within the community, what we should do is go back and say, right, this is our expert opinion collectively as to what is a category A and a category B. And these are the circumstances under which we think it should be applied and shouldn't be applied. And then we can then feed that back to the regulator, because we've got a community. It's difficult for example, with Insure to go back to the regulator and say this is what we think. But if we can collectively, if we've got Metropolitan and Camden and people like that all saying the same thing, then that's much more powerful. So if I just put this in context, I did a workshop a couple of weeks ago where Dame Judith Hackett was the keynote. But in that group, there was Cross. I don't know if you know what Cross is, but Cross is the reporting in it. In fact, Paul Womack there was also in the audience. And one of the things that was really coming out from that is what is it that there's a big talk about competency. A lot of it was around competency. And although that's absolutely right, I think we do need to get to that. It's also the case, but what we need to do is have something where there's more standardization of approach, because the challenge is supply chain members, they just don't know what they've got to do and what they haven't got to do. What Vic's just talked about there, which is approved schemes and whether they are accreditation. If you listen to the session that we had on fire doors the other day, there are no accredited schemes that mean that you don't need to report to the regulator. There aren't any, right? And that's because none of the approved schemes will take on that responsibility. BM4Trada, for example, which a lot of people think is an approved scheme, isn't, because it's not rigorous enough, apparently, according to the experts, to actually get down to the level of individual operators. So one of the things that I think we could do is feed this into the standardization group. And then, and again, I'm looking for volunteers to join that. So if you think this is an important thing to do, put standardization into the chat and we can incorporate you in it. And what we'll do is we'll use the subject matter experts in the different disciplines to actually come up with a way of doing it, because I think that's what we need to do. Benson, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have. Mine's probably going to be linked in with the AI, but since we got expertise in the group at Fort, I'm also asked. So part of my my job role is to check for compliance on our documents. So let's say the technical submittals we've already issued, match them with the specification and also the contract what we've actually sold. Is there an easier way to do it, or would it be through AI? Because also with the checking, also basis on the regulations and sustainability guidance and other sources.
Okay, so shall I just give you my opinion? Well, as well as being the chair of BIM4Housing, I also run a software company. So
Okay.
we use AI,
Okay.
but we use AI very cautiously, because we know.
Check it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Denson.
You kind of use it as a 75%, then you do the final check, just make sure, because AI, I suppose, can pick up the things you haven't thought about, but you need to verify it, because as you know, AI can make up things, right?
Well, that's exactly right. So I'll give you an example of that. One of the things that we're using it for at the moment, we've got a large project where we've got asset types that have been created in BIM models with uniclass information.
Okay.
What we need to do is put against that product data. Now, the product data that was in the O&Ms wasn't adequate. So what we're doing is going onto the manufacturer's websites and getting the product information. And we're using AI to be able to do that extraction. But what was interesting, one of my guys was telling me the other day, is that what we're doing is we're also training, we need the uniclass code against that product to be able to do the matching between the asset type and the product.
Okay.
And it was returning a uniclass code, but not only was it the wrong uniclass code for that asset.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know that was the case unless you knew what you were looking for.
Okay.
What it also does, what it was also doing, it was it wasn't a valid uniclass code at all.
Wow.
And uniclass has got I don't know if you know, it's got 8 digits, and you've got to know what you're doing to be able to identify that that was the case. So what we're now doing, we've built what's called a RAG, it's a private sort of LLM to be able to do that checking. So that's really what I was saying at the beginning, that if you are interested in learning more about how that works, the key thing with any AI is the knowledge of what you want to do.
Yes.
That's the most valuable bit. And if you've got domain knowledge of what you actually want to achieve, then it means that you can be there, you can check what's being delivered.
That's right.
And then make sure that it's actually the answer is the right answer. And then we've got something that we can use. So if you're interested in that area, I think it's going to be an absolutely critical part of what we do, but we mustn't be reliant on it. It's got to be guarded.
I agree, and I'm definitely interested because I was in a conference where a facade conference, and most of the the facade consultants, they are building their own in-house, and they're doing the same thing. Or obviously they cannot rely on AI. They do the checking, so the AI will pick up other things a human could miss, and they just double check it. Everything is verified to make sure it is compliant.
But it can, if you're using AI to do that type of compliance checking, you've really got to make sure that the data set that it's applying is one that is right.
That's right.
So one of the things, I mean, that's the reason we've gone through the BIM in asset management, or the BIM4Housing guidance in significant detail, because what we needed to do was make sure that the information itself was adequately robust before we started training a large language model on it.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm really interested in that.
Cool. Okay, that's good.
Thank you.
Paul, you were going to say something.
No, you stole my thunder straight away, because I was going to mention collaborative reporting on Cross UK.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, in fact, do you just want to explain what that because you were at the meeting as well, and it's good if you say something rather than just me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what it is. It's an organisation that it's a confidential reporting system to do with anything with issues with the building, whether it's a individual item of a subject, or it's a group of people like us. It's not just about buildings itself and problems with structure of a building or way things operate within a building. It's also, if there's concerns regarding management, we're looking at ones that we have concerns with senior managers within organisations aren't aware of their roles and responsibilities. We're also potentially looking at one following on from a meeting we had this week in regards that we don't believe that we're getting all the information that required from Regulation 38. So it's those sort of things that we can go, they will have a look at it, review it, it's given a reference number, and then it is published. And I don't think it's actually actionable by, I can't remember who it goes to, George. I know it's sent out to all various different bodies, but I can't remember where it goes to from there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges, actually. The reporting itself of any problems, there's nowhere, the way the Building Safety Act has been set up, there's nobody to report anything to. And in fact, actually, people like us can't report anything. The only people that can report are the tenants or the residents. That's my understanding. That you might be able to help me with that. But that I've been told that if, for example, somebody noticed something, then there's nobody that you can't report it to the regulator, because the way the regulations have been set up, the only people that can report are the residents. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true unless it's a safety concern of the building itself. So if something's happened with the building itself, you've got to report that, obviously. But I think with regards to like practices and management, etc., then no. As far as I'm aware,
Can I intervene on this, please?
Yeah.
Basically, the way, as you rightly say, is set up is purely for HRBs to report mandatory occurrence reporting. And sadly, it's on the principal designer during the design, and it's on the principal contractor during the construction. During the operation or occupation, it's on the PAP and the AP for that particular building. And as you say, with the residents to actually flag things up. And if they're not getting cooperation from that PAP and AP accordingly, they can report to the BSR directly about a fire spread risk or a potential structural failure or collapse. Those are two aspects that only considering structural failure or collapse and or fire spread. Yeah. That's the two things. That's the only things BSR are focusing on, irrespective. We all look at things holistically, and there's hundreds of risks with buildings without going on about. But that's all they're focusing on.
Well, yeah. Where I'm coming from with this, Steve, yeah. And there's, for example, fire risk assessments.
Yeah.
Where the fire risk assessment raises a particular action that's needed,
yeah,
and then nobody does anything about it, and there's no transparency, it appears, as to who should be doing that.
Well, that comes under the Fire Safety Act and the Fire Safety Order. That's where the fire flipping rescue services come in. As you know, I'm old school fire brigade. Fire rescue service is supposed to intervene, but it's again all reactive. It's not prevention.
How would they know?
Again, back to you mentioned the role of the RP, responsible person. Yeah, where the information about fire safety, as you know, the Precious Regulation 38. That's to be provided at the end of the project of any changes relate to fire safety information. There needs to be that audit trail. I'm telling you to suck eggs, everybody. I do apologise. Of providing that information, and it's the principal contractor's responsibility, believe it or not, to provide that via their subcontractors to that RP. An RP to confirm in writing that that information is sufficient in order that they have got the information and then can carry out, as you're rightly saying, the fire risk assessments for the ongoing maintenance and operation of that building. That's how they've got to have that audit trail from the completion of any refurb, alteration, doesn't matter if it's HRB or non-HRB. This is under fire safety. There's massive contentions with this, the way it's been written and in silos by the Home Office and the flipping HSC with DWP as it was.
So that's why I'm suggesting, Steve, that we as a group, if there's good practice, then that's something that we should be doing. I'll just show you something else. So some of you have been on the BIM and asset management meetings. And one of the things that we've been doing here, this is another resource that we've been creating. We've been, over the last 3 meetings, we've actually been doing surveys to really understand the maturity of the industry and ask questions to see whether, for example, senior management, so this was the point I think that that you were saying, Paul, whether the senior management who control the budgets actually understand their duties under the BSA, and 89% of the people said that they didn't believe that their senior managers had a proper understanding of what they needed to have. You can have a copy of this if anybody wants a copy of the survey. Again, just put survey into the chat and we'll send you a copy of it. There's also things like we asked questions like, are people checking the contents of the fire and emergency file on an ongoing basis to make sure they're still correct? And a fair old percentage said that they were, but there's plenty that said that they weren't. Here's another one. Should the fire risk assessor read the fire and emergency file before they complete? And 95% believe that the fire risk assessment should include that check. So I won't go through this in any more detail, but there are some things in here that are quite useful to say, for example, how often should an AOV be checked that they're operational? Then also, should people, if you've got a fire risk assessment, should you be checking above the suspended ceiling to ensure that the compartment's there? Now, a lot of people have fed back that, almost everybody, in fact, I think it is everybody, said that they should. Let me see whether that's an example of that. But yeah, and also, should the responsible person have a record of the safety critical assets that haven't been inspected? And 100% of people thought that should be the case. Yes, Vic.
Yeah, so our fire risk assessments will advise to go and get those checks done, but the fire risk assessments themselves don't include going into the loft space and checking the compartmentation. So yeah, we're on quite a big program at the moment of going around and doing those checks, and putting the stickers on to where there's penetrations to say that they've been sealed adequately, etc. But it's a big piece of work. But I do find that quite a few risk assessors don't actually do it; they just advise it.
Absolutely. Say again, sorry?
They're not competent, that's why. They're not actually trained enough to not actually know what they're looking at beyond in the dry rises, wet rises, in the plant room, everything. They've just been doing risk assessments of the common areas.
At the conference that Paul and I were at, Joe Judas said that there was one where the design for a sprinkler system, the pump wasn't adequate for the building, so it could only generate the pressure to the building to get up to the 13th floor, and there's 20 floors. And the installer apparently knew that was the case, but they still installed the pump and didn't do anything about it. Now, here's another thing. So that's quite shocking, really, isn't it, to say the least? And I think that's a really good learning thing that we should have. But when we were talking about that yesterday on the sprinkler workshop, what they were saying was that in London, some of the water companies are turning down the pressure because they get less leaks that way. And therefore, some of the sprinkler systems that were commissioned and were working with the right pressure are no longer doing so. Which that sort of questions how should when sprinkler systems are tested on an annual basis, should the pressure be checked at that stage, which I would have thought it should. So this is the sort of thing that we're collecting. So standardization of this sort of thing. If you're in agreement as a development group, because you are actually representing the development side of things, I think you're quite influential on on this. Who else have we got on that hasn't spoken yet? James, have you spoken earlier? I think, can't remember if I've asked you. Where are you from, James? James Hood. Perhaps jumped off for a coffee. Davina? Are you there, Davina?
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Davina. Where are you from?
Hi. I'm from MTBH. I'm in the same team as Paul. We're
Ah,
Mac.
right. Okay, cool. And what do you do? Are you a building safety manager?
Yes, I'm a building safety manager as well. I've been in the organisation about 8 weeks now, so I'm still relatively new.
Okay, that's good. And Afam, are you still at Enfield?
Yes, George, yes, I'm still in Enfield.
Good. Okay. We need to catch up.
Okay, yeah. I really need to speak to you, but that will be private, yeah?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Should we go back to the agenda? I've just realised how good Richard Freer and David Post are at running this, because it's not easy being a chair.
Doing a good job. You're doing a good job.
Yeah. So, is there any feedback? Is anybody being held up for any at any gateways or anything like that? Are you experiencing issues with any gateway reviews or anything like that?
Gateway 2 is something like a 42-week wait.
Have you got any of those, Paul?
No, luckily enough, at the moment, I'm not dealing with any of them myself personally.
But the organisation is.
Yes, yeah, and this was sort of about 6 weeks ago, so it may be longer now.
And
but
how many?
What
have you got more than one?
Yeah, I imagine we have within the organisation, from what I hear. But I think that from what we heard at the other week that we were at with Dame Judith Hackett, was that it's not necessarily the fault of the regulator, because the information that they're requesting is very, very basic, and people aren't giving them the right information. Hence, they're sending back the request saying, you need to give us the information. You need to give us the basic information. So it's a failing on the people who are requesting the submissions.
Absolutely. And we had that both from from Bureau Veritas, didn't we? So Bureau Veritas are one of the organisations that is acting on behalf of the regulator to actually do the audits, and she was saying it's quite shocking, the some of the submissions, and I think that's where a lot of the blame is being placed on the regulator. I mean, there's no question that they've got problems, but it's not something that is entirely down to them. Has anybody else got any delays or anything like that? Denson?
Yeah, we've experienced. Sorry, go on, Denson. You go first.
Sorry, you already started today.
Thank you. We've experienced significant delays, and actually it's not because the information isn't correct. It's not because the basic information isn't there. And I don't know why it is, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I think it was only last week that I saw, and this isn't a client of ours, but I saw that L&Q had waited 13 months for a Gateway 2 approval, and they'd finally got it. And that was with minimal requests for information going back and forth between the regulator and L&Q. So, you know, it's a little bit, you kind of go, well, yes, there's obviously those people out there that aren't putting together, you know, a detailed enough application or putting together the information that the regulator wants. But then there's the flip side of that actually we're seeing some applications that are very comprehensive, that have a lot of detail in them, and they're still waiting 38, 39 weeks for an approval. So you kind of then go, well, what is the hold up with that? You know, I know, and kind of flipping this over to safety case reports as well. I know there are companies out there that are kind of running up to the 52-week marker currently with no requests for information and no contact from the regulator at all. So it's a bit, well, what is happening with those? Like, what's going on? Because if there's no request for information, then surely the information that they need is there. They would have known that within the last 50 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the impression I got, so I've been to a couple of sessions with the regulator and you know, also with Tim Galloway's, the feedback he's had given is that, and also Neil Hope Collins, I don't know if you know him, but he's saying that 70% of the information he gives loads of examples of things that are fundamentally wrong. So I think you're absolutely right, Nikki, that some people are doing the job properly, but the system's being clogged up by people that aren't.
Well, hopefully with the new information out, what was it, last week, saying that actually new applications are not going to be going into that backlog. They're now going to kind of feed through to the MHCLG and this kind of transfer of the regulator from the HSE over. Hopefully that will kind of sort it out. But then to me, I kind of go, well, what's now to stop those people who are in that waiting queue resubmitting their application? Yes, paying for that if absolutely necessary, to go through that new process with the application that they've already submitted, and then that getting clogged up with people who's, you know, are not providing the correct information or not providing extensive applications. What's to stop that now happening?
Absolutely. Vic?
Yeah, so we submitted one of our blocks for soil stack replacement, and I'm aware that took many months to get through. And the information that was requested, it was quite onerous considering it was soil stack replacement. And it seemed to want to include quite a lot of what we already have in the safety case. I mean, actually had a safety case report for it that probably could have sent through, but they didn't want the full safety case report. They just want information that was within that. But sometimes I find that the terminology, you know, the regulator may call it one thing, you know, via a safety file or whatever, and it's what then is determined from that. It would be good if what they asked for, they then was prescriptive in what that meant, what they was expected within that, because we all have, you know, which we shouldn't, but we do all have sort of different terminology for things. So that was one thing we found with our soil stack replacement scheme. On the building safety case, so I put my 2 highest blocks through, and it did take 9 months to get them through. However, they were coming back for information, and I did actually get the building assessment certificates for them, which was a very long process, and very relieved when we got them. But what we've been talking about earlier as well, I think, you know, the management and how we manage and how we glue information together, and, you know, you can't get away without doing that and get a building assessment certificate at the end, because what I went through to prove and evidence the way we manage and the way we collect, you know, we've got the golden thread going through everything. You know, you really need to be doing that in order to get building assessment certificates. There's that many teams involved. I've had a look at that information. So it will come out once you've had to put your safety cases in, if that's not going on now. And really, we should have been doing that for a number of years already to make sure that's embedded. So at this stage, we're sort of quite late in the game and talking about it still, aren't we? But obviously, it is where we are.
Yeah. So what you just said there's music to my ears, really, because you've been through the process and you've learned quite a lot from that. So when you're then going into the next one, you know at least some of the questions that need to be asked. And then if we can also feed what you've learned, Vic, well, along with other people, if we could feed that into some sort of knowledge base, then it's going to make it a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Happy to share that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Denson.
Yes, thank you. So yesterday I went to the CWCT AGM meeting, and the topic was obviously the hot topic, Gateway to Building Safety Act. We had Neil Hop Collins from the Building Safety Regulator, and he did a presentation, and various questions were asked from numerous facade engineers, architects, and other consultants. So one thing which all of you guys have already commented on, what he said was that to make the evidence clear. So the problem is with this industry, we are so good when we've been in it for years, where we package everything, we put everything in, we do the tests, we get technical tech subs and everything, the drawings, everything, and it works. We've done it for 20 years. But the problem he's saying that is this industry does not know how to tell the story, to simplify, to be clear for somebody who's actually reviewing it. It depends who's reviewing it. You just need to make it clear, so straight to the point, what they need to see, what you're doing, what's the regulations you're covering. So within that, the question was asked, the BS, are they going to do a guide on how they want to see this information, or kind of lay out a kind of generic guide of how they want this information. So they said they'll do that, and the CWC team for facade engineering will offer their help. Then the next point was you mentioned the 70%. He talked about the 70% as well of applications not going through the information. Obviously, some of them they can put everything together, but then they're not explaining properly. Some are not actually putting the competent, compliant information, and it's getting rejected. So, and also, if you go on the website, the FAQ, it's not really clear. So what you just mentioned, what's her name, Vicky, Victoria, about lessons learned. I think that's really, really good, because at the end of the day, we as an industry, we cannot be making the same errors in terms of presenting the evidence. So if the industry knows, and if we can all share this information, I think that's a good start. Yeah. So yeah, we should definitely do that, and obviously evidencing the competency of the people who are on the projects, along with key.
So what absolutely, one of the things, Denson, that's worth you knowing is that in BIM and asset management, we've actually been doing work around standardizing the way health and safety files and O&Ms are structured.
Okay.
The reason we're doing that is that when we go through and do reviews of information, often it's all over the place.
Yeah.
And often it's collected by work package rather than by system. And unless you know which system, which work package a particular element's in, which, you know, as a contractor, you probably know, but certainly somebody coming on to it clean wouldn't know which, you know, for example, if you're looking at doors, which work package are the doors in?
What scope is it? What area is it?
Yeah, they could be in. So we've got a project that we're reviewing at the moment, big one, and the doors are in 3 different work packages. One's part of the facade. Another, you've got the internal fit out and things like that. And then you've got what was in the original base build. So they're
Yes.
in different work packages. So you don't really, and then they've not been properly, or they've not been aligned in a standardized way. So the door schedules are different, and they're not referencing things properly either. So as a positive thing, what we've been doing over the last 18 months or so, we've been working with the HSE to produce a standardized structure for both health and safety files and O&Ms.
That's good.
So if anybody's interested in that work, we've got some templates. If you put health and safety files in the chat, I can plug you into the work that's been going on in that area. What we're also doing is looking at this from a point of view of making the technology make it easier for people, because we understand why contractors do that. They'll they want to allocate a particular work package to that contractor, and they want them to produce the O&Ms. Now, therefore, the information is going to come back, and if the documents are held in a database instead of simply as folders, the documents themselves can be tagged with metadata, which then allows you to slice and dice them in different ways. Now, that's not.
I like that.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, as Active Plan, we've done that as a tool, but that's a methodology. So that is something that a site and other people, we encourage them to do as well, because we need to be able to find information easily. And I'll just give you a quick example of that. On this project that we're auditing at the moment, the all of the work packages, they weren't even down by what the work package was. It was the name of the company. So therefore, there was probably 30 different companies working on this particular project, and you had to know what that particular contractor was doing to be able to find the information about what you were doing. Which this is, a very prestigious project that you'd think they'd get it right, but that's the sort of thing that I think we need to. If we can get more standardization on that, it's going to make it a lot easier to find things.
Yeah, it makes my job easy as well.
Exactly. Yeah, these are the points that David was making. That's a really important one. The earlier commitment to do the detailed M&E design and smoke ventilation design to mitigate costly late stage So are we seeing people actually doing that now on the projects that people are involved with? Are we seeing that the design, because basically design is supposed to be complete before construction starts? That's the whole idea. But are we seeing any move towards that?
It wouldn't get through the gateways, would it, if it wasn't done?
Sadly, I think it is getting through the gateways, because the M&E element of that, Vic, is often contractor design portion.
Okay. I mean, I know I've picked some of this up in like damper surveys and what I've done, and surveys that I've done retrospectively and in some of the blocks that are already there. And what I've done is I've passed the information that I've got and what I'm gathering onto our development team to make sure that that's included in the tenders. This is what they want, and that goes out in the tender for the handovers. So you'd expect at tender stage they should be working these up to go through the gateways, but as you say, it doesn't always happen, does it?
Yeah, so it's probably just worth me, you might find this useful. Where the contractors are using BIM to deliver a lot of this stuff, there's something you need to be aware of, that a couple of things you need to be aware of, which are complications on that. I think in many client organizations, there's this perception that everything goes into the BIM model. And if it's in the BIM model, then the detail will come out. In fact, something like at least 50% of the things that are required for Regulation 38 would never get modeled.
Okay.
Right. And the reason for that is that the systems and products that are actually installed, like electrical and mechanical, unless there's something called levels of detail. And what often will happen is that the level of detail, for example, of identifying a pump or even dampers is excluded from the project because it's not considered to be a clash detection requirement. So therefore, it never goes in the models. And certainly the detailed information isn't modeled in any way. Actuators, for example, which are, I think, pretty important part of the components. Door closers, you'd never see or very seldom see modeled. They'll be there in a schedule, but does the schedule actually match and map to the information in drawings? So what often will happen is you get a lot of disconnected information, and therefore a lot you get at handover won't be complete. The second big lesson, which is again not really understood, is that if you're expecting the team to give you a BIM model at the end of the project, there is no such thing as a BIM model. You will have probably 10 BIM models. You'll have 20 BIM models because each discipline will create their own model, and it then becomes federated. So from a visual point of view and a clash detection point of view, that's all fine. And we can take that as a federated model and use it. But it's important to understand that that's the case. Now, where that becomes difficult is if you've got a project that runs for longer than probably 2 years, it will start using a certain version of Revit, say. And by the time your project is handed over, the version of Revit that they've used is no longer compatible with the current version of Revit that you can buy. Yeah. So unlike things like Word, where you can you can go back and open a Word file that was created in an earlier version of Word, if you try and do that with Revit, the likelihood is that it will have errors, and the errors could then be cause problems. So therefore, on a contract, you should always ask for the model to be updated by the people that are delivering it. So if you've got a project that's being handed over this year, you should require them to upgrade it to the current version of Revit. Demetrius.
Hi, hello, George, and thank you for the presentation and all the information. A couple of questions so I can better understand a little bit. Does the regulator mandate the delivery of building information models with respect to fire safety?
No.
No. Okay, so at the current state as it is, what is the delivery as part of the deliverables from the designer or as BIM models
That
to the
would be
constructor, let's
determined.
say?
That's really, I guess, my point. That would be determined in the contractual information requirements. There's no legislative requirement to do that. What there is a legislative requirement for is, in particular, on the fire safety, you need to have a floor plan with all the safety critical items identified on it. But how you create that and how you keep it up to date is up to the team.
Correct. what I'm trying to get to is that, as you already know, there are various standards at this point, mainly ISO 19650 and ISO 7817 with the level of information aid, that if implemented as part of the deliverables, and there is also an IDM, an information delivery manual, standardized, which could be also the outcome of this work group as part of the information needs, then indeed all the information could be inserted within the BIM model, not necessarily as geometry, but as information. It could be documents that could be connected to the building information model, and so as such. The outcome of this is that you have a centralized place where all the information are kept, a common data environment, based on which everything is updated according to the RIBA plan of work, where it's on the construction stage or the delivery stage and so forth. And each person has clear transparency of what was delivered. If it was delivered, you can generate rules, check based on the deliverables and see whether what is delivered is applicable for the next stage.
Yeah, and I absolutely understand that. And I've been involved in, I was one of the founding members of what was called the IAI and is now called Building Smart. So I'm very familiar with that process. What I would say is that the competence in the industry of being able to carry out that work is not adequate for people to be able to rely on it. That's one problem. The second is that invariably, when the projects are procured, the contracts don't include the requirement or indeed the money for M&E, for example, to be as-built M&E to be added in. So unless the money is there, and unless there's a contractual obligation, an explicit contractual obligation for them to actually provide that, in my experience, and I've been doing this for a long time, it's not happening. Yeah, so I absolutely.
What if it was regulated by the regulator to be delivered as a deliverable for each stage of the RIBA plan?
We've probably had the closest to be able to have that stuff regulated from the work that we started back in 2000, about 15 years ago, and through the BIM task force and all of the different initiatives. The challenge is that most of the standards, including the one you've mentioned there, the 19650, they're not as explicit as the original British standards, the 1192 standards, which were far more explicit. And you would need something quite explicit, Dimitros, to do that. ISO standards, in my experience, don't go down to the level of detail that you've just outlined. But that's not important. The important thing is for us to identify as a collective what information we need to get out and make sure that it is part of the requirements. So I absolutely agree with you that all of the information should be in what I call a BIM model, a better information management environment, yeah, which may have 3D, but it may not. There's lots of reasons on existing buildings, for example, where you don't need 3D.
I agree.
So therefore, I absolutely agree with you. It's an information model that we should be working to. And I'd be very happy to share with you our experiences and what we're trying to do in making that more rigorous. I mean, I've just spent this week going through the new 19650 Part 6 standards, which is the safety set. Last night I've just given feedback to the HSE on that. So there's a lot of great stuff that we're doing and we're contributing to. But I think you're right that as an industry, as a group, we ought to be holding people to. We ought to be defining what it is that we actually need. And the reason I was just talking there about the situation with the BIM models and Revit wasn't to talk them down. I mean, we're actually a Revit developer, so I'm not denigrating it at all. What I'm just trying to do is make people aware of what they should be asking for, because I think it's a nonsense. Another classic example, we've run over now, but I should say this other project that we're working on at the moment, we've found that the architects removed all the floor plans or from the model. They've removed all the sheets. So if you wanted then to, from the model, regenerate the floor plans, you can't do it because they've taken that out. And that's quite common. Now, that may not seem important because you've got the drawings and you've got them in the O&Ms, but actually, we're now having to go through and regenerate the COBie information because it wasn't done very well. But we've got no space references because they've deleted the sheets. So these are the sorts of things that we need to learn about as a development group, so you know what to ask for. The best people will be delivering the good quality information, but if budgets don't allow for it, then that's a problem.
I see your point, and thank you for the feedback. I don't want to along the discussion. I will try to DM you on the subject, and maybe we
No,
can
absolutely.
have a chat.
I'm very happy to have one-to-ones with anybody on this sort of stuff. So good. Okay. Well, I hope you found it useful. I'm really, really looking forward to the next one where David Pope and Richard and Paul White are running it. And then and if you want any information on the ones that we've done this week, the safety critical assets, if you've already put your name in the chat, that's great. We'll get that information to you. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, George. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, George. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, George.
Cheers.